Okay, so this is the last talk of the evening. We'll try and be quick. I think of somewhat less slides than Thierry, so it should be a couple of minutes quicker, hopefully. So just a quick overview of the ICBF beef genetic evaluations. In total, ICBF evaluate 52 traits related to beef production. 6 of those 52 traits are what we call farmer-scored traits, in that they're voluntary traits scored and submitted by farmers to the database. You can see there we have calving difficulty score, and obviously that leads to a direct trait and a maternal trait, mortality at birth, weanling docility, weaning quality, cow docility, and cow milkability. And the top 4 traits there are included in the suckler beef breeding goal that Thierry mentioned in the previous slide, whereas calving difficulty, both direct to maternal and mortality is also included in the dairy breeding goal, which is the EBI, or the Economic Breeding Index. The remaining traits then are weaning quality, cow docility, and cow milkability are used as predictor traits in the suckler beef value. So just for today, I'm going to concentrate on looking at the weaning docility and weaning quality traits. Okay, and I suppose following on the back, for those of you that were here at the earlier sessions, there was a discussion on the Department of Agriculture 5-year scheme, which is the Animal Welfare Recording and Breeding Scheme, which was set up in 2008 as part of a 5-year scheme, with the intention of trying to promote certain positive welfare practices and recording and breeding in the Irish suckler population. Okay, so farmers had to adhere to certain animal welfare measures around disbudding, castration, weaning, and sale, and they had to record sires, calving ease, disbudding, meal feeding, weaning docility, and calf quality measures. Okay, so in that initial 2008, spring 2008, there was about 60,000 herds actually signed up to the scheme, and as a result their data was transferred to ICBF from the Department of Agriculture, and there was a monetary payment initially of about €80 per cow in the scheme, and that came back to about €40 per cow in later years. So moving from a situation where we had sire, it moved to a situation where we had sire recording on a commercial beef herd from somewhere less than 10% up to about 85% in the initial years, and that's currently resting at about 75%. So some herds have fallen out of the scheme, but the majority of herds have remained in the scheme. Okay, and this is just a snapshot of the recording sheet that farmers were actually asked to record. There was a pre-weaning sheet where they had to record calving ease, disbudding measures, and then once that was submitted, they got a post-weaning sheet to fill in. So basically you can see measures along 4 different sections of it there, including date of weaning, calf docility score. Calf docility score was labelled as calf docility score at the time of weaning, and scored from 1 very quiet, average, difficult, and 5 very difficult. Calf quality score, 1 very poor, below average, very good, and exceptional. Okay, so about 83% of the farmers submitted their data through paper, postal, paper or postal-based option, about 17% on the internet. That was the first year. It's moved more now towards internet-based recording in later years. So just concentrating on those 2 traits, I suppose from an ICBF point of view, are these traits heritable? And if so, are they genetically related to other traits of economic importance that ICBF are evaluating? And I suppose with the calf quality score, has it a relationship with existing weaning and carcass traits? And the docility score, well, we actually did have already a measure of docility where ICBF technicians, mainly going out to pedigree herds, were scoring these animals on a scale of 1 to 10. So how did the weaning docility score measure, as measured by farmers, line up with that measure as scored by technicians when they were visiting the farms. Okay. So looking at the data editing steps that we applied to that particular data, well, it was started off, this is spring 2012, about 2.7 million animals in the database with a calf quality and a docility score. A certain proportion of those had no sire recorded, about 6% of a loss. So the other edits that we applied to that data were if the animal was recorded after it was sold, so it had left the herd and the farmer had recorded it. We did not include those records, about a 14% attrition rate there. If they were recorded more than 100 days after weaning, we also imposed an edit and knocked out those records, about 5%. The age window that we were looking at concentrating on was 150 to 300 days, so it was about 28% lost there. And a contemporary group of 5 animals, so about 4% had a contemporary group of less than 5 animals. And then the last edit then were herds which had a variation on the day of scoring. So what we've set for herds up to 14 animals, that would be at least 2 different scores on the day of scoring, and for herds greater than 14 animals on the day of scoring, there had to be at least 3 scores, so about 23% loss there. So in total, from 2.7 million, we have about 564,000 animals qualifying, which is about 20%. A subset of these records were then used to estimate heritability and genetic ties with other economically important traits. So just looking at the weaning quality trait first, in terms of heritability of it, it has a heritability of about 0.38. And I suppose how did that compare to some of the other traits in the ICBF evaluation? Well, the linear scoring traits as measured by the ICBF linear scores in terms of the muscle and skeletal traits will vary from about 0.28, sorry, that should be up to 0.38. Weaning weight, heritability about 0.35, and carcass weight 0.48. So it's sitting somewhere in between the linear score traits and carcass weight. How does it compare with those other traits of economic importance? Well, Thierry had mentioned in his previous slide briefly, when you're looking at initially at the pedigree animals that have been weight recorded and linear scored, we can see that it has a genetic correlation with muscle traits of between 0.49 and 0.57, and a correlation with the skeletal traits of between 0.13 and 0.21. So farmer or pedigree breeders' perception of weaning quality tended to side more with what they would view as a more muscular animal, as opposed to an animal that had a higher frame or a bigger skeletal score. So in terms of, that's the pedigree side of it. So how do the commercial farmers tend to score the animals? Well, we have also got information coming from the livestock marts, and again a genetic correlation with weaning weight about 0.35, a genetic correlation with mark price per kilo of 0.6, and again this would be more of an indication of a more muscular type animal. So what you would conclude from that is that both pedigree breeders and commercial breeders tended to view calf quality as a measure of muscularity more so than weight and size. In terms of the carcass traits, a genetic correlation with carcass weight of about 0.34 and with carcass conformation of about 0.48. Okay, and with the carcass cuts that Thierry has just mentioned, that varied between 0.12 and 0.49. So various degrees of genetic correlations with the other traits that are being collected and evaluated by ICBF. Okay, so moving on to the weaning docility trait, in terms of the heritability of that trait, it's a heritability of 0.3, so slightly less than the weaning quality heritability, and comparing that to the technician docility score of 0.22, so it seems to be the farmer scored docility seems to be slightly higher than the technician scored docility. Maybe some of that is down to the fact that the farmer has maybe a full 10 months to assess the animal, as opposed to the technician who is only going in on the day and scoring it as he sees it. Maybe there is an element of that in there. But there is a strong genetic correlation between the two types of scores. So farmer scores and technician scores, correlation of about 0.78. So there's somewhere in the region of about 4,000 scores in common that are they're animals that the farmer had scored them, and also the technician had scored them. So it was good to see that there was a good correlation between those scores. But just looking at the type of pattern that was scored in terms of docility, on the left-hand side we can see the farmer scored weaning docility. About 12% had, this is animals' records making the evaluation, about 12% had a score of very quiet, 40% a score of quiet, 41% a score of average, and 5% difficult, and 0.3% of very difficult. And then similarly on the technician score, about 14% were classified as docile, the highest scores, a 9 or a 10. 67% were restless, a 7 and an 8. 17% were nervous, a 5 and a 6. About 1% were flighty and wild, with 0.1% deemed aggressive. Okay, and again the technician score was measured between 150 to 300 days, so the age range is the same for both sets of traits. Okay, so this is a snapshot of the genetic merit for farmer scored docility by breed. Because we have a large contribution of crossbred information in there, we do publish, we do evaluate and present all our PTAs on a crossbreed basis. So while there is variation in the breed averages across the breeds, the most encouraging point of view is that there is significant variation within each of the breeds. So what you see there is the top 5 and the bottom 5 percentiles. So those bars are covering 90% of the range in genetic merit. Sorry, the range in genetic merit for 90% of the animals in each of the breeds. So quite a substantial amount of genetic variation there to work with. So from our experience, what are the problems with farmer scoring traits? I mean, obviously when we're looking at this data, we have to make a call around the ambiguity around the validity or the credibility between certain scoring patterns. There's no variation in docility score. Mean that they're all scored very quiet, which does happen, or is it a case of indifference by the farmer to scoring the animals properly and just scoring them all as ones or all as twos? Well, certainly with the animal welfare scheme, there probably would have been some element of that because there was a monetary-based payment. So as a result of that, we did have to make a call and screen out herds that did not show variation in a particular scoring session. Okay. We also commenced a pilot project last year where we actually we asked farmers to score cow milkability and cow docility. And that was voluntary. There was no monetary based payment there. So there was about 120,000 scores came back, and we found that had a heritability of 0.4, so slightly higher than the weaning score docility. So what we would probably find from that particular data is we're losing less data there because farmers have an active interest in actually scoring it. So it was slightly higher quality. Obviously, it's very, very useful data, but to get down to the edits that we have imposed there, we're down to 20% of the particular data there. So you would actually like to see maybe more of that data making the evaluations. Okay, I mean when we're looking at some of the other traits that are scored, our calving evaluation is based primarily on calving scores in the evaluation, and I suppose we do have a problem around underreporting of calving scores, particularly in some pedigree herds, which is an issue that we need to try and address. So we're probably looking at maybe a correlated trait with birth weight in the coming years to try and address that. The big problem, I suppose, with the the animal welfare scheme, well, not necessarily a problem. It was a brilliant scheme, recording sires, recording docility, recording calf quality. The big problem is that it's ending at the end of this year. So it was a fabulous resource for setting up that docility evaluation in particular. But you know, from our point of view, we would like to see it maintained in some guise going forward. Docility it's a very emotive issue out on farms. You know, unfortunately, there are a couple of deaths every year. So, if these docility figures could help to lead to reducing at least some of the incidents of injury or death on farm, then they're very well worth promoting and recording in the industry. So, just to summarise, farmer score traits have an integral role in ICBF, the ICBF Genetic Improvement Programme. Be they included as directly as goal traits or included as predictor traits for other economically important traits. They're quick and expensive to record, and that's a necessity for commercial herds. What we're finding with the benefit of maybe the calf quality score in particular is that we do get a measure on the whole herd before that herd is broken up, and some animals may go towards the livestock mart, and some other animals may go towards the factory, and other animals are kept for replacement. So you tend to have quite a good sizable contemporary group on which every animal is recorded. They have strong genetic ties with economically important traits, as I showed in some of the slides, particularly for the calf quality trait. But I suppose education is important to convey the importance of recording post the end of the scheme, and that's the big problem we're facing at the end of this year. Can we maintain the level that we have of maybe 700,000 or 800,000 calf quality and docility scores coming through the scheme? Hopefully we'll manage to keep the majority of those farmers recording that data. So I think that's it, Alan. We'll leave it at that.
Right, thanks, Ross.